Greetings everybody, I'm obviously Jesus, fresh out of the shower, hair's wet still as you can probably tell. Today I'm going to make for my, what I believe is the third Patreon video of the month of June. I want to make a video dealing with a pretty highly requested topic. I want to answer specifically two questions or two requests from Shimmy Llama and Ginny June, who I believe are the same person. I think they changed their name on Patreon. And my friend Superhands, talking about A, dealing with depression, and B, living what I called and what he called, and what I called in my first Patreon video ever, I think, a service level life. And sort of dealing with the aspects of life, you know, trying to survive and get through the day and live a life dealing with pretty crippling depression at times. And I don't have notes for this commentary like I usually do. It's honestly, you wouldn't think that it would be hard for me to talk about my depression and talk about depression in general, having lived with it for so long. But honestly, I live basically the same way for the past 3 years, so it's hard for me to have any insights that I feel are new and current, and it's kind of hard for me to go back and mine those older insights that I haven't really dealt with in a while, when it was really fresh and raw and painful. So, I apologize if this commentary is not as structured or just not as structured as you would normally expect from me, but I'm going to sit here for as long as it takes to get through all my thoughts about depression, living a life that is shallow enough to avoid pain, and stuff like that, and hopefully you can derive something from that. So anyway, I'm obviously Jesus. Welcome to this video. Here we go. First and foremost, I feel it's probably good if I talk a little bit about my own depression so you can sort of understand my own perspective and where I'm coming from when I give you these insights and sort of my limitations on my understanding of depression. So anyway, my depression is primarily, I believe, environmental. I obviously have, well, not maybe obviously, but if you remember a lot of my old philosophical videos, I talked a lot about my family and my history. And, maybe not too much specifics, but definitely I let on that I was basically, I struggled to say fully abused as a child or neglected, but emotionally I think I was definitely lacking in terms of my parenting. So I want you guys to understand that going into this. But, depression is a lifelong thing. You can trace it in most cases way back to your own personal origins. It doesn't usually just start randomly out of the blue. It usually has roots going all the way back to childhood trauma. And we all have childhood trauma. It's not like some people get in, some people don't. But there are definitely, obviously, varying degrees of trauma that can be inflicted on someone. And of course, and this is what people forget a lot when they say, oh, you can just get over it, you can, just power through it. People have different levels of fortitude, of emotional fortitude, which is something that I like to talk about a lot, because there are certain people in this world who can metabolize, basically, abuse or depression or neglect and turn that into anger or turn that into something that can be channeled and used as a constructive force in one's own life. And there's some people who cannot. There are some people like me, and this is one of I find the defining features of myself is that I just get crushed. I just get crushed by emotional neglect or abuse or a lack of love, basically. And it's not that my parents didn't love me, which is sort of weird considering what I just said, but my parents, I lost the ability at a very early age to feel anything for them or from them. So I no longer love my parents, I don't think. I sometimes feel positive feelings for them, maybe a shred of admiration or gratitude, depending on if they help me with something or if they give me something for my birthday or something that I like or that they've really paid attention to. But I don't feel love. I don't know what it's like, really, to feel love or a real connection, either going to or coming from my parents. And that's one of the defining features of my depression, I think, which is that I have only felt love in the past, probably 15 years from romantic relationships. And that is one of the cruxes of my being, because really, I only have one source left of love. And lack of love is one of the things that I believe defines my depression. When I say that my depression is primarily environmental, if I already said that, maybe I didn't, but I do believe my depression is primarily environmental. I have obviously a chemical imbalance in my brain. There's no depression without some factor, internally, of course, because it's a machine. It's a machine that receives input and gives output. You are that machine. Your brain is that machine. So, you're not going to be depressed if there's nothing in that machine that's a bit off. But, obviously your input greatly determines your output also. You're not going to output the same stuff with vastly different input. If I had a lot of love in my life, I wouldn't be nearly as depressed as I am and as I have been in the past without, even if my machine, my brain, is still the same level of fucked up between those vastly different inputs. So basically, to recap, at a very early age, I lost the ability to feel love to or from my parents. They were too busy fighting with each other and abusing each other to really create an environment where I could thrive and I could grow and I could have positive models for relationships and whatnot. And, it was, I think around when I graduated from high school that I truly realized that for a long time I hadn't felt anything for them. And so my focus turned thusly to the idea of finding somebody else to have a relationship with and to feel loved, to feel loved for and to feel loved by. So that's where it started for me. That's where, not necessarily where it started, but where it really turned for me. And I realized that I was a person who had really only one avenue to love and acceptance, because whatever part of your brain feels love and support from your friends and family, and I never really had friends, that's something I don't really know or really can elaborate on. It's something that I just never really have had a close network of friends or felt the need to have one. It's not, I believe, a problem for me. I just simply feel that friends are like in this little corner over there and they're nice to have, but they're not, you don't feel loved by them in the same way that you would feel, or you would hope to feel loved by your family, or that you would hope to feel loved by a romantic partner. So friends aren't really a support network for me, and that's just how I'm built. Again, it's part of my brain machine. And so my depression is rooted in the fact that I can't feel love from anyone except a romantic partner. And of course, as you might imagine, it's very hard because it's very hard to maintain a relationship, in a situation like that, because when you are starved, imagine being a human being starved for love to, the extreme, who can't feel it from anywhere else. Friends can't provide it, your family has ceased to provide it long ago. Imagine being that creature who feels no love from anybody, and you walk through the world and you try to find somebody to love you and to accept your love. And it's hard because when you get in that situation, when you're existing like that, it just that state of existence is your existence, you're very desperate, just on a base level. Even if you're not trying to be desperate, even if you're trying to rein it in, you're still on some kind of ontological level a very desperate creature, because you only have one avenue and you want it. And love is what makes life valuable. People, I think, only really value highly what they love. Either they love their work, or they love their circle of friends, or they love their family. Whatever you want to love is fine, but I think it would be foolish to say that what you love is not the defining feature of basically any human being's life. So if I only have one avenue to get to love, I am, just by nature, more desperate than other people. So it's something that I've always had to deal with, and being that desperate can push people away. And I don't want to go too much into the details of how that happens and whatnot in my past relationships. Basically, I'm very clingy, but this is a video about living with depression, so I should probably stop talking about my my own depression eventually. But anyway, yeah, it's very hard to be that desperate and not push people away in a certain way with your intensity. And especially at my age, people aren't ready for that level of commitment and intensity. And people my age are very in flux. And people, the last relationship I had was when I was 20. And especially even then, more so even then, people are very much in flux at that age. So, people are having different priorities. They're experimenting with, they're graduating school, they're trying to do jobs, they're trying to do extracurricular stuff, they're trying to go on vacation and travel and do all this. People aren't ready in the way that a desperate person like myself is to sit down and form a life and form a loving family in the way that I was ready to, because I lacked a family. I was so desperate to make my own family and not necessarily have kids, but just that, even if it's just me and another person, another woman, yeah, like I'm a woman. But anyway, if it's just me and a woman, that's a family. That's a new family unit, distinct and separate from the shitty family that I came from. A new start. That's a Arrested Development reference. But seriously, that's what I wanted. I wanted that two-person family unit to start over again and to repair the damage and of what I suffered when I was young and build a happy life out of a shit one, which I suppose was probably, pie in the sky. But that's what I wanted, and the inability to do that has caused me at times to be very depressed. And so now we'll talk about what it is to live with that kind of depression, that kind of environmental, primarily, depression. Now, it may seem odd to hear this coming out of my mouth, but honestly, I have a very strong self-preservation instinct, and I honestly would be remiss if I didn't talk about suicide, but I don't want to act like a person who is very well versed in dealing with that, because I am a person, again, who has, for some absurd reason, that has so often run counter to when I'm feeling a pretty decent drive to live. So I've never been on the verge of suicide. Yes, I've thought about it in a sort of vague sense, but I've never planned anything. So I really can't speak to how it is to deal with suicidal depression. And I apologize if that's something that you wanted to hear me talk about, but I feel it would be arrogant and presumptuous of me to really talk about that. But all I can say on the subject is that if you're thinking about that, you should also consider and weigh the fact that being alive is the only state in which you can affect your situation. You're never truly powerless. You're never truly without options. You can always, in some small way, even if it's minute, work towards improving your situation. You can, even sustaining your situation allows you to live another day and open yourself up to the possibility that something independent of you that matters to you will change externally based on external factors. So keeping yourself alive is something that basically I do because I believe that being alive is the only state in which I can affect my situation. And even during the dark, dark depression, when my ex first left me, at the very beginning, I thought I was going to commit suicide for a brief time, for maybe an evening. But I, very quickly pivoted to the idea that I was still alive, still breathing, still able to contact this person that I love and try to convince them. So I always opt personally for trying to change either the other person's mind, change something within myself to make myself more appealing to that person. There's always something you can do to affect your situation, or at the very least, you can bide your time and wait for something to change them externally. So I really don't want to talk too much about suicidal depression because I personally don't have that much experience with it. But let's talk about the real meat and potatoes of it, the living day-to-day with depression. Living in the same house, the same bed, the same routine every single day for, years and years potentially. And we'll talk about the logistics of living a little bit later, but first I'm going to talk about the emotional aspect. So what I do basically every day is I wake up, I turn on my computer, and I spend all day either playing video games or watching, Netflix or what I've downloaded off the internet, basically catching up on TV, movies, etc., etc. So what I do basically to stave off that depression is fill my day with surface level activities. And that's one of the things that I think you probably wouldn't get this advice from a therapist or something like that. Your therapist would probably tell you, I should probably say this as a disclaimer, to go out and meet people and, don't isolate yourself from the world. But I know it's hard. That was never really appealing to me when I was a happy person, even in the rare periods of happiness that I had in my life. So I'm not going to be one of the people who tells you to go out and, take a class or, I'm talking about stuff that you can do by yourself on basically a low income and try to take your mind off of what is ailing you, basically. And that's one of the things that I want to stress. Basically, there's not a lot of time in the day. That's one of the nice things about getting older as well. When I was about 22, my perception of time sped up quite rapidly. And so it became much, much easier for me to fill a day and not really think about what was depressing me. And that's basically my solution about dealing with depression, is to do things that maybe not enrich you, but that you enjoy, that are surface level, that don't require a whole lot of critical thinking, that don't require a lot of, philosophical deep thinking about your state in the universe or your cosmic perspective of how small you are or how much you've lost or your future. Do things that bring you into, the here and now, and, like a video game where you're focused only on what you're doing in that moment. Or bring yourself into another world, another fictional world. Read, watch a movie, watch some television. Get really invested in these universes and take yourself out of your own universe as much as humanly possible. Do these surface level activities, and you're not really wasting your time, you're consuming culture. It's not like you have to sit there and watch 24 hours of Cops. You can watch prestige television. It's not hard, even if you don't have an HBO, Showtime, etc. subscription. You can pursue what culturally interests you. Hell, you can look at art online. You can listen to music. You can watch anything basically within a few clicks. And honestly, if you have limited funds, I would suggest that you definitely still invest in an internet connection, because that's all you need to get a bridge into basically anything that is out there in terms of culture, and for you to access. So what I recommend to you, if all else fails and you really have nothing to do, you have no other people, and you only have yourself and your computer, I would honestly just say, do things that don't require a lot of thinking outside right here and right now. And that will keep you focused, not necessarily focused, but sane from moment to moment. And that's what I do. I get up, I go on, social media, I have, Instagram and Tumblr and, all that stuff. And then when I get bored of that, I can put on Netflix. And when I get bored of that, I can put on a movie. When I get bored of that, I can play some PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. When I get bored of that, I can play some Guild Wars. When I get bored of that, I can, watch whatever TV series I'm following on any given night. There's tons of stuff out there that is highly rated, that is interesting, that is mentally stimulating, that is, darkly comic or philosophical. You don't have to watch, like I said, trash TV. You can sort of enrich yourself by way of this culture. It doesn't have to be a brain-rotting experience. so you don't have to let yourself go to waste. Don't think of it as a waste. But what I'm trying to get at here, and after I've done all those things, after I've done the TV, the movies, the video games, etc., 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 when I get bored of each of them, you know what time it is? It's like 4 a.m. and I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to sleep 10 hours. I'm going to wake up at 2 p.m. and I'm going to start doing it all over again, basically. And, there are things that you could do. I mean, obviously this varies immensely from person to person. I think everybody kind of likes the current forms of media that are out there, but I go to concerts. I have enough money to, purchase the occasional concert ticket and go to concerts because I really value the experience of live music. But and that's probably the most social thing I do. But if you don't like that, you can still fill a day. You can absolutely, positively fill day after day in perpetuity with all these activities that I've mentioned. Don't think about anything, basically, that requires you to hope for the future, because hope is a real motherfucker sometimes. Hope can be very deceptive. And honestly, I will tell you, in all honesty, in truth, that the most pain I feel is when I'm alone, when I get out of a concert, when I've had a really good experience and I, get back to my car and I'm driving home and I'm alone. And I realize that I never have anybody to share that experience with. That experience that I just had, as good as it was, is going to die with me. And that's the downside of going outside and being social and having these experiences that people typically have with other people. It's that you have to sort of innately compare it to what it would be like with another person. And that hurts more than sitting in the house day in, day out, watching TV and such. It hurts more to think about what your life could be. And that's honestly what I would tell you to avoid. Don't think about what your life could be. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to be confronted with a comparison of what your life could be in that same situation with somebody else. Do things that you like to do by yourself that you would be doing anyway. Stretch that out to a day and live day in, day out doing that. Honestly, the only other times I feel a lot of pain is when I think about my future, when I think about, how empty it might be. But honestly, I can keep myself distracted from that. I can keep myself living that surface level life without my brain completely rotting, without having to be vapid, without having to be uncultured. So basically what I've done is I've created a system in which I don't have to decay, but I also don't have to suffer the pains of, experiencing constantly what my life could have been. Because that is really the thought that hurts. If you could stop thinking about that, if you can get yourself to a point where you can fill your day with enough stuff that never creeps into your mind, it doesn't hurt. Alright, so I've talked for a while now. If you have any more specific questions about how, depression affects me on a day-to-day basis, please ask them. I've been a little bit all over the place. I haven't, like I said, got my thoughts together. They were kind of amorphous for this video, and I'm really just, to some extent spitballing up here. But before we go, I want to talk a little bit about the logistics of living a life like this, of how you can sort of afford to live a life like I'm living. And basically it helps to have parents who you can convince of their complicity basically in your current situation. If you can make that case to them, then I think that there's really no shame in living at home or living in a place funded by them in order to keep yourself sane. Because if it's just you, who can judge you? Who can judge you if you want to live off your parents, because they put you there and they probably contributed to your trauma. And there's also a couple of options available to you, at least in the United States. I have no clue how this affects other people living in other countries, but I have family members who have gone to basically the Social Security Administration, and they've taken various tests administered by psychologists, and based on what have been determined to be their mental disabilities, You can literally be declared a disabled individual, and you can receive a paltry sum of money every month, but it's still enough to live and have a few enjoyable things and buy yourself some stuff every now and then, and you get EBT for food stamps and or SNAP or whatever the hell it's called. And you can also apply for housing through those programs. And again, I have family members who've done this. And one of the things that you can do in the United States, at the very least, I'm not sure if this test is accredited anywhere outside the US, but in the US at the very least, I know it's one of the most validated and researched tests. It's called the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Index. It's a bunch of true and false questions that basically reveals on, I believe, 10 different scales how severe your mental conditions are. That is one of the ways to make a strong case, I believe, for your mental disability, which will shore up your funds basically and make you, have options for how to live that sort of surface level life where you can afford internet and you can keep your mind off and you can keep your wits about you basically in a tiny little bubble while you wait for either something to change you or something to change that person that you love that you're still waiting for, or something that you're waiting for life to happen to you, which again is not obviously something your therapist would tell you, to wait for life to happen to you. But I know that obviously that's sometimes what you have available to you. That's sometimes the only option you have available to you. And I figure I would be remiss if I didn't at least try to help people who feel like they're in that situation but don't know how to swing it. So basically, if you have any further questions, I am absolutely more than available to make a continuation of this video. If you feel I haven't properly explained something or you want more details on a specific aspect of it, I would definitely appreciate more specific queries, because this was kind of an open question and I'm bad at open prompts. But I'm obviously Jesus. I hope I've given you some tips on how to live with depression, or ideas on how to fill your day and stay sane and not be tormented by what your life could have been, or still could be. And it still could be. It could be that in the future. It doesn't have to preclude you. That's the nice thing about this. You don't have to be precluded from anything good happening to you in the future. You just have to wait. And this is a video about waiting, because that's how I deal with my depression. I wait. I don't think about what ails me. I focus on little tiny things in the moment, and days pass quicker and quicker as I get older. And you might think that I'm wasting my life, but when you die, you can't think about how you've wasted your life. You can't think about how much time you spent. You can't think about that. If you just keep your head down. I know it's not great, but we're not talking about a situation in which you have the opportunity to be great. We're talking about a situation in which you're desperate for a way to not be tormented. And I hope I've been able to help you in that respect. So, I'm obviously Jesus. Thank you very much for watching. Next week we will have either a continuation of this video based on comments that I receive, or we'll have cooking with Christ. So, either way, good week this week, good week next week. I'm obviously Jesus again. Thank you very much for coming and watching. We're almost at the $200 mark for Patreon, which is fucking crazy. But thank you so much to all my patrons. Thank you to everybody who watches and enjoys these videos and keeps them happening through Patreon. I'm obviously Jesus. I've said that 4 times now. I'm gonna shut up.